The Great Peace, the Voice of Humanity, National and International Decolonization Independence Referendums, Ending Corruption Within Our Countries and the World. Drafted March 8, 2012. We, the undersigned people of Canada and the United States of America, support and demand a referendum to complete decolonization of all North American lands of Turtle Island, and standing by the Great Law, White Roots of Peace Constitution, dating back to the 1100s with the Indigenous Original Nations, and for our full independence rights to true and complete decolonization through the United Nations Decolonization Declaration of 1960. From Her Majesty the Queen in right of Canada, and from the Crown, the Holy See Vatican State, as self-imposed allodium title holders of ownership of the North American lands through terra nullius, land without owners. The Doctrine of Discovery, Inter Cetera Papal Bull, May 4, 1493, and Feudal Lands Fee. Whereas many treaties that were made between the Crowns and the Indigenous nations show clearly that Her Majesty, the Queen in right of Canada, and the Crown, the Holy See Vatican State, were aware that the lands were not vacant, and that Her Majesty the Queen in right of Canada and the Holy See were in a position of negotiations with the original inhabitants. These treaties, concordats, had been consistently encroached upon by the colonizers, which would also render them null and void under the Vienna Convention on Treaties of 1969 if the indigenous nations as allies had been allowed a voice within the United Nations and in the international courts. And whereas in 1945 the Charter of the United Nations proclaimed the respect for the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples as one of its basic purposes. Self-determination means that the people of a colony or a dependent territory decide about the future status of their homeland. The process by which these territories exercise their right to self-determination is known as decolonization. And whereas in 1960 the Declaration on the Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and Peoples was adopted by the UN. In its advisory opinion, the General Assembly of the United Nations had requested on two questions concerning Western Sahara to the International Court in regards to terra nullius. The advisory opinion of the 16th of October 1975, determined by the International Court judges in regards to the first question, stated that the court was unanimously of opinion that Western Sahara, Rio de Oro, and San Kitts and Nevis at the time of colonization by Spain was not a territory belonging to no one, terra nullius. And whereas, through UN decolonization and the International Court's advisory opinion of 1975, outcomes now set a precedent in such that all lands claimed through terra nullius and the Doctrine of Discovery by Her Majesty the Queen, Spain, and the Crown, the Holy See Vatican State, and all other colonizers in all other colonized countries are now rendered null and void, as most were inhabited by the indigenous nations throughout North, Central, and South Americas and the world. At present, North America is currently comprised of colonized corporations by Her Majesty the Queen in right of Canada and the Crown, the Holy See Vatican State. And whereas, through complete decolonization, we will return all final decision-making authority of all national, federal, provincial, municipal, and international affairs to be shared among the people of North America, Turtle Island, with our new, true, independent governments within each of our countries, and working in conjunction with the Indigenous Original Nations People's Councils as the original caretakers of these lands. Referendums can be done yearly or as often as they will be needed, which will allow the people to vote on issues that would have otherwise been voted on by politicians. And whereas by placing the voices of the people as final decision makers on issues for their countries assures that all decisions will be made by the people in consideration of the people, and no longer in consideration of government, corporate, or personal greed. Politicians are to become true public servants without final decision-making authority, bringing issues to the people for their ridings referendums. And whereas the proof of our inalienable rights within international law has been provided herein and cannot be disputed or disproved of within the decolonization process, therefore, all Canadian and United States militaries, National Guards, courts, and all law enforcement agencies and police will serve and protect the peoples of these newly independent countries and fall under the jurisdiction of the indigenous original North American nations of Turtle Island and people of Canada and the United States of America, and no longer be within the jurisdiction of Her Majesty the Queen and Red of Canada, nor the Crown, the Holy See Vatican State, the City of London, and Washington, D.C. corporations. And therefore, we further demand that a moratorium be immediately executed to stop all exploitation of North American natural resources and all funds from the natural resources and lands exploited, sold, or transferred by Her Majesty the Queen and Red of Canada and the Crown, the Holy See Vatican State, or by the present Canadian and United States governments, corporations, and including all taxation payments imposed upon the Canadian and United States peoples, and especially through health care, education, and social services rendered to Her Majesty the Queen and Right of Canada through Revenue Canada, the IRS for the Crown, the Holy See Vatican State, since colonization, be internationally seized and returned to the indigenous North American nations and to Canada and the United States of America and all other decolonized and decolonizing countries, where exploitation of the people and their resources has occurred within their lands, especially since 1945 and beyond. And whereas we also demand that a moratorium be immediately executed in regards to nuclear, military equipment, and arms sales or transfers of any military nature to other countries, as well as financial military aid will immediately cease, and all military, peacekeepers, and other military personnel will return to their respective countries other than those on humanitarian missions we deem acceptable, as all wars must cease. We, the undersigned, further state that our true independent government of we, the people, will respect and honor all indigenous nation treaties and land claims neglected and disrespected by the governments, Her Majesty the Queen, and the Crown Holy See Vatican State, and to govern ourselves accordingly with respect of the indigenous nations as the caretakers of these lands and bearing equal weight within the two-row wampum, uphold the Silver Chain Covenant and the Dish with One Spoon treaties for all the peoples of Canada and the United States of America. We, the undersigned, declare and acknowledge, having read the entire 2 pages of The Great Peace, The Voice of Humanity, Decolonization Independence Referendum Declaration, and that we agree and consent completely to this undertaking by Ongwehowe, Haudenosaunee peoples of the 5 nations, and all original indigenous sovereign nations of North America, Turtle Island, and we, the people, citizens of Canada and the United States of America. If you'd like to print the petition, please go to our website at decolonizenorthamerica.org or .com. You may also join us on Facebook under Decolonize North America, as well as email us at decolonizenorthamerica@gmail.com. And please make sure to catch Natasha's show every Thursdays at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time.